While assimilation can lead to prosperous life experiences, it can be the sort of poison that can strip an individual of their identity in an attempt to fit into societal norms. As we venture into the future, we are condemned to become more bound patients of existence, to find an equilibrium between life, death, a stasis of the soul.
As people of culture and people who explore the depths of religion and womanhood, it's intriguing to find poetry that addresses all of those subjects and highlights them in such a simple yet intricate way. We often feel small and unrecognized in such a busy world, and oftentimes we feel the need to relate to someone or society so we feel connected. But what does it take to feel in tune with our true selves? Masochism of the Knees by Jackie Wang. Who is the girl forced to kneel on dried chickpeas to atone for the sin of being alive? In the dream, blindfold and bandage are one. My hands go numb as I carry dried chickpeas. In my head, there is a voice that says, "Naked forest," and a tiny photograph that is passed between hands in the dark. Why doesn't the girl on the floor of the world talk? Because she is a wound on the earth's hide, not mouth. Do you understand? Wound, not mouth.
I'm Johnny.
And I'm Haley. In this episode of Beyond the Snaps, we're going to dive into the work of Jackie Wang in her novel, The Sunflower Casts a Spell to Save Us from the Void, specifically her poem Masochism of the Knees, to explore the existential elements in culture, womanhood, and religion with the intent of providing commentary and finding a balance between identity and repression.
For some background on Wang, as a prison abolitionist, her perspective on the criminal justice system and its impact on individuals could contribute to the poem's exploration of suffering and atonement. This perspective was heavily influenced by her brother's incarceration at 17 years old for discretionary juvenile life without parole while she was in grad school, which solidified her belief that criminals are also capable of being victims, and their victimization is indicative of the prison industrial complex and the judicial system as a whole, stemming from capitalistic greed.
What stands out the most in this poem is the elements of introspection and the use of rhetorical questions. Who is the girl forced to kneel on dried chickpeas? Why doesn't the girl on the floor of the world talk? Do you understand? Which at first glance may appear to be directed in a mal manner toward the society of our new culture. But upon greater reflection, the aggressive questioning may not be directed to someone else, but rather to the speaker. We see these outbursts of questioning and reiterating, and assume that there is an audience made up of a society. But that audience is the speaker's dwindled reflection staring right back at her. It is almost as if the speaker's subconscious, or rational soul, is attempting to recover what lively part there is left. Confidence, confrontation, and subordination. The two counteracting needs of identity and repression creates this complex idea that for a being to feel recognized or even accepted into life, there is also the inevitable occurrence of becoming victim to pain, or rather stripped from identity, which we see through the speaker's atonement for living by kneeling on dry chickpeas. This complexity that we see in the speaker stems from the poem's seemingly simple yet stinging traumatic layers.
We see the introduction of chickpeas, and they are also repeated toward the middle of the stanza as they show themselves to be a moral and cultural symbol for the speaker. Chickpeas themselves are a Middle Eastern cultural food, as well as symbolic of God's judgment being less stern. Both elements are seemingly broken due to, again, Wang's experience of pushing and pulling between whether cultural or social acceptance is more valuable, and how religion plays into that social acceptance. Not only is her cultural identity crushed by the effects of assimilation, but also the idea of that God's judgment is forgiving because it is evident that the speaker is not faithful. There are doubts and there is hesitation that we see in her pain due to her eliminating her culture in the process, as well as, although not specified, praying to just make up for the apparent sin of having this identity that she realizes cannot be lived through if herself insists that she wants to be accepted into this assimilated lifestyle. Wang accentuates how quickly culture and life is lost, starting with the physical pain derived from the image of the knees on the crushed dried chickpeas and the numbing hands when holding chickpeas. What is first meant to be a sign of masochism, failing to the suffering of assimilation to find pleasure in being recognized, turns into a completely unrecognizable and unrecoverable self-identity.
The speaker's blindness becomes a powerful expression of her repression of herself, portrayed through the incorporation of dream imagery. By using blindfolds and bandages, Wang creates a sense of disorientation that symbolizes entering a dreamlike state to escape both the physical and mental confines of reality, which are contributing to her suffering. But even in the haven of her own mind, the speaker still feels self-imposed repression of the self.
Confinement, a recurring theme in dreams where action like speaking, running, or fighting are often restricted, is reflective of the subconscious using dreams as a coping mechanism for loss of identity. The intentional blindness symbolized by the blindfold serves as a means of repressing what society dreams the worst part of herself. This intentional blindness represents a deliberate choice to remain unaware of her true identity. The blindness functioning as a bandage reinforces the idea, as the speaker describes how blindfolds and bandages are one, emphasizing her attempt to conceal her cultural identity.
Why doesn't the girl on the floor of the world talk? Because she is a wound on the earth's hide. These particular lines stood out to me. I feel as if the speaker is starting to reach a broader, bigger concept of things. We go from small, pebble chickpeas to the sphere of the earth, as well as the apparent wound on its hide. When interpreting hide, we think of an animal's fur or skin. An animal is very different from a human in that humans have more depth in why or how they live. Animals just survive. We especially see that the speaker makes a clear distinction between a wound and a mouth, which the speaker denies herself to be. The speaker being depicted as the wound of an animal's skin shows that perhaps her own tangle of emotions is a hindrance to survival, or rather life, and she has no way of controlling that, as she would if she were a mouth, which controls the rate of survival by hunting and eating.
What do we think is the best version of ourselves? What does it take to achieve that? Although one may have been separated from their culture, the remnants of that culture leave a mark on their character and sense of self. But as the needs adapt according to the standards of the new given atmosphere and overall culture, the imprint of the previous culture fades. It's in that pain of letting go and of choices that one ultimately finds pleasure in knowing that it essentially leads to an acceptance by a new society. It all comes down to whether or not one chooses to address the root of their suffering, and if it's even deserving, just for that small gratification of recognition from others.
Masochism of the Knees by Jackie Wang. Who is the girl forced to kneel on dried chickpeas to atone for the sin of being alive? In the dream, blindfold and bandage are one. My hands go numb as I carry dried chickpeas. In my head, there is a voice that says, "Naked forest," and a tiny photograph that is passed between hands in the dark. Why doesn't the girl on the floor of the world talk? Because she is a wound on the earth's hide, not mouth. Do you understand? Wound, not mouth.
That's so passive aggressive starting the recording so I can't respond to you. You're so
Okay,
passive
stop.
aggressive.
Stop, let me read. Shh, be quiet. The speaker's blindness becomes a powerful expression of her repression of herself, portrayed through the incorporation of dream imagery. Can we add bloopers at the end? Can we add bloopers at the end?